There are two kinds of quiet daughters in every house. The ones whose silence is obedience, and the ones whose silence is memory, and most parents never learn the difference until it is far too late. My name is Quinn Everett. And by the time my mother slid a manila folder across the kitchen table on the morning after my 18th birthday, smiling like she was offering me breakfast instead of a contract, I already knew exactly which kind I was, because 6 months earlier I had started paying attention in a way she had never imagined I could. It began with a cedar box my grandfather had given me before he died, a box I hadn't opened in months until one October evening when the house felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. When I heard my mother's voice low and careful downstairs with my stepfather Mark, papers whispering like secrets being folded. And inside that box I found a sealed envelope in my grandfather's handwriting that told me to open it only if something felt off about my mother before I turned 18 and to call a man named David Caldwell immediately. I didn't open it that night, but I should have, because everything that followed was already in motion. My father had died when I was 10, leaving behind a grief my mother performed for exactly 1 week before moving on to a new kitchen, a new husband, and a new version of our life where emotions were treated like liabilities, where crying was drama, and laughter was showing off. So I learned early to go quiet, to observe instead of react, to store every detail like evidence, and when my grandparents, my safe place, the only people who let me feel without punishment, passed away, they left me something my mother saw not as a gift, but as an opportunity. A trust worth hundreds of thousands, locked until my 18th birthday, protected by an attorney I had never met. The first sign that something was wrong came in small inconsistencies, a man in a gray suit visiting every Wednesday. My mother changing her story about who he was, Mark making careless comments about family money, and phrases like, closer to your birthday, that sounded less like celebration and more like strategy. And one afternoon I overheard enough to know there was a plan involving me that I had never agreed to, so I finally opened my grandfather's letter in a cold park under a gray sky and called the number he had written, and that call changed everything. David Caldwell spoke to me like I was capable, like I deserved the truth, and when I met him he explained what my grandfather had set up and what my mother was trying to undo. A document drafted by an attorney named Lance Briggs that would have turned my inheritance into shared family assets, giving my mother control, shifting ownership into a company tied to Mark, and effectively erasing the independence my grandfather had intended for me, all timed to happen while I was still legally a minor, so I would need her signature to make it valid. It wasn't just manipulation, it was calculated, and it had been happening for months while I sat at the same kitchen table eating meals she prepared for me. I didn't confront her, I didn't argue, I didn't change anything about how I acted at home, because Caldwell told me not to, and instead we built something stronger, a new irrevocable trust, one that would activate the second I turned 18. One that could not be altered or accessed by anyone but me, one that would protect me even from my own potential weakness in the future. And while my mother planned her version of my birthday, complete with pancakes and a folder she expected me to sign, without question, I prepared mine quietly, signing documents at 12:01 a.m. with a notary and a corporate trustee on the line, securing every dollar before she even woke up. So when that morning came and she smiled and told me we needed to talk about the money, when she slid that folder toward me and called it just some paperwork, I played my role perfectly. I read every page slowly, asked simple questions, let her believe she still had control, until the moment my phone rang at 9:03 a.m. and I put it on speaker, letting Caldwell confirm in a calm, measured voice that the trust was already funded, already protected, already beyond their reach, and the silence that followed was louder than anything I had ever heard in that house. My mother's plan collapsed in real time. Mark's anger couldn't change the facts, and even Skylar, my stepsister who had been told just enough to go along with it, realized something had been wrong all along. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse. I simply stated what was true and took the folder with me when I left, walking out to my aunt's car with a clarity I had never felt before. What happened after wasn't dramatic in the way people expect. It was quieter, slower, and in many ways more revealing, because without my money as a safety net, the cracks in their lives widened. Mark's business struggled, debts surfaced. The lawyer who drafted those documents was investigated and suspended, and the carefully maintained image my mother had built in our small community began to unravel, not because I exposed her, but because the truth had a way of finding its own path into the light. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to tell my side loudly. I just needed distance, and in that distance I found something I hadn't known existed before. A version of quiet that wasn't fear or suppression, but peace, the kind that lets you think clearly, choose deliberately, and build a life that isn't shaped by someone else's expectations. I moved in with my aunt, then went to college, using the trust exactly as it was meant to be used for my education, my stability, my future, and slowly, carefully, I rebuilt a sense of self that had been flattened for years, while keeping the door open just enough for my stepsister, who hadn't been the architect of any of it, to find her way back to me when she was ready. A year later, sitting by a library window watching snow fall, I checked the trust statement and saw not just numbers, but proof that my grandfather's belief in me had been justified, that I had chosen well, and that the quiet I had carried all those years had not been weakness, but preparation, because in the end the difference between the two kinds of quiet daughters is simple. One learns to survive, and the other learns to remember, and when the moment comes, remembering is what saves her.